And welcome to Pulpmythos. We watched the Autopsy of Jane Doe. Before we get started with the review, the channel is going to be changing up a little bit starting next week. Next Sunday, you'll be getting a preview of Perry Mason. Spencer and I will be discussing the trailers, maybe a little history of the franchise, what it is, and then the reviews will return the following week on Friday. The movie reviews will be moving to Fridays. So there's that. And we're going to get into this review here. So this film, we're going to do spoiler free up front, and then we're going to go right into spoilers. So off the bat, it's rated R. It's about an hour and 26 minutes. It's labeled this is all from IMDb. A horror mystery thriller, came out in 2016, just like the last film we did, Hush. If you haven't heard that review, go check it out after this one. It was directed by, I'm not even going to try and say his last name, but Andre something. He did the Troll Hunter film, the found footage Troll Hunter movie.
Yeah, I didn't even check to see who that was.
Overdahl, I think that's how you say it.
Yeah, I've looked at a lot of the actors in this movie, but I didn't look to see who the writer or creator or any of that stuff was.
I have not seen. I saw some of Troll Hunter. I've seen a few clips from it, but not all of it because I'm not a fan of found footage movies. I've seen several of them, but it's just not a genre that I'm really into. So I typically don't check them out, even if they're recommended, unless somebody just was like, "You have to watch it." And
Blair Witch Project. Let's do that shit.
I've yet to find one that I loved. I usually some are tolerable, but I'm just not a found footage
They
fan.
give me motion sickness. I can't do that shit. Ooh.
But this film, the premise is a father and son, both coroners. Oh, hold on, something popped up on my screen here. All right. A father and son, both coroners, are pulled into a complex mystery while attempting to identify the body of a young woman who was apparently harboring dark secrets. And boy, was she ever. Without spoilers, what did you think of the movie?
Well, I just wanted to give kudos to not only the actors, but the actress, the Jane Doe.
Having to lie there the entire damn
it wasn't
time.
It wasn't just a dummy or a body. Obviously, I'm not spoiling anything because people know what autopsies are, and you cut people open. But like the way they did it, like she didn't. Her look, I don't know, unless they create. It just looked too real for it to be like a dummy. I just felt like she did really.
My assumption is all facial shots were her. I think the only time they may have used something, obviously the gutting scenes, the autopsy scenes, close-ups of that. But some of the side shots they probably made. I don't know. I could be wrong. Maybe she just laid there and they put on the prosthetics on her. Because you're right, it just looked too real throughout.
And that's what I'm saying. They did a really good job. I felt budget-wise, I actually just looked it up before you called. They said it's anywhere between like the low 1 million to 2 million tops to film this movie.
Damn, that's impressive.
Yeah. And after watching the movie, I was like, that's really good. I mean, we talked about it too with Hush. They filmed it. It basically takes place in one area. This movie basically takes place in one room, like, with a couple hallways. So, budget wise, the acting was great. Han Solo did a good job. And I just felt like, to me, we talked right before the Black Coat's Daughter. We enjoyed that, but that's a movie that we like the premise of it, the way it was filmed, shot, cinematically, we enjoyed it. Hereditary, it was just bad. It just was what it was. It wasn't good. But Hush is a good horror movie. And I think this, although it's a much different horror movie, very similar. Like, we just enjoyed it. I enjoyed it because it was a good horror movie.
Yes. This was a straight up horror film. And sort of in the genre of, I'm not even going to say that. I don't want to spoil it, but it gets into sort of, I'll use the word haunted house as far as I'll go with it. The first half of the movie, there's nothing. It's very gory, a lot of gore because of the autopsy stuff and the opening sequence. But as far as things getting really interesting, it's the second half of the film, and I loved it. I loved it so much. I would put it on a um, if I'm doing like a marathon and around Halloween of watching horror films. This goes on that list. Like it was that good.
I wouldn't disagree. It's like I said, not only the acting, but everything in the movie was well done. It felt like a much higher budgeted version of what it was. I mean, it was excellent.
Yeah, there's a lot of effects. So yeah, I didn't even think to check the budget on this one. But yeah, great. So for me, two thumbs up, or I don't even. We never do a regular
Slinky
rating scale.
Dogs.
Yeah, we were doing Slinky Dogs. We were 4 out of. I don't even remember how many. Uh, I'd almost say like I. It's rare that I would say okay, a perfect movie, but I would say for what this movie is trying to accomplish, it's pretty much perfect. You know what I mean? Like I can't think of anything I would have changed in the movie.
I don't either because it's not only is it doesn't over explain anything, but similar to Hush, there's parts of it they didn't feel like they needed to explain. So it was just clear cut. They explained what they needed to kind of fill in the gaps, and then it just played out. It was just very well done. I didn't feel there was loose ends. At the very end, they left it to where maybe there could be another one, but
Yeah.
there doesn't have to be. There was
No.
closure. I really enjoyed it.
So if you've not seen it, I would say definitely more so than any of the reviews we do. Stop now, go watch it, and then come back because I would. Matter of fact, don't watch a trailer for it. It's best just going in blind. It's more fun that way, not really knowing what's
It was for
happening.
me. I had no idea what the hell was going on.
I didn't know what it was about at all, outside of the title, obviously. So yeah, I recommend checking it out. I give it a as high of a rating as I could. If you like horror films, check this one out. Real creepy, real graphic. So we'll put that up front. Did I
Yeah,
put
lots of naked
lots of
stuff and lots of
nudity?
blood.
Lots of yeah, it's rated R for bloody horror, violence, unsettling, grisly images, graphic nudity, and language, and that is all accurate.
Yes, very.
So, all right, we're about to move into spoilers in 7, 6. I don't know. I picked 7, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Spoilers from here on out. So,
All right, when that bitch. No,
so we're gonna do similar to what we usually do. We sort of go through it almost scene by scene, but we're not gonna be as how do I say? I sort of broke it up to sections. So I don't really like doing the scene by scene. I want to do more general, like opening, middle of the film, late in the film. But I have my notes. We'll see if it works or not.
I'll just follow you.
Yeah, we'll see
That's
if it
good.
works. Yeah.
Good to go.
All right. So the opening of the film, it lets us know that we're in Virginia, and we see this house. It's sort of a quiet shot, and then when we get inside, the brutality is already thrown at you. You're seeing this horrific murder scene, and I don't know about you, but I was like, "What the hell happened?" Because I was trying to piece it together as the camera was moving through, and I was like, "Shit!" I couldn't figure it out. Something horrendous went down.
Well, I'm not sure because they brought over the bodies, and I think that maybe some of the bodies that they brought in previous, because throughout the movie they show the different bodies. So I think that the one that was shot in the head and the other one that had the mouth sewn up, I think those were all from whatever it was that happened there. So I think that they had, uh, I think they were all tied in. And that body they weren't expecting to find, Jane Doe. And then when they did, they were like, oh shit. So I think the ones that they were working on prior to Jane Doe showing up, I think those were all from that scene, which didn't make it any easier to figure out what happened. But I think that. They
Yeah, I
were
was
all
very.
connected.
I was the body I was most confused about was the eyes and mouth sewn up because I was trying to think what the hell scenario would that take place. Um, but yeah. So there was definitely a lot of craziness going on in that house. So we're introduced to the sheriff, who is he's dude from Bolton, right? Game of Thrones.
Yes.
Yeah,
No. Who? Who are you talking about?
the sheriff.
Yes.
Yeah. So he comes in and they go down into the basement and there's a body sort of halfway in the ground, buried in the ground. Young female, nude and dead. So they say, "Oh, we're gonna, what the hell was going on? What happened?" The police are very, on edge, and then we cut and are introduced to the main characters of the film, the Austin and Tommy Tilden. And we're shown that basically there's this mortuary business. It's a morgue and crematorium. It's family owned. The Tilden, this I think 1919 was the date it was established. It was established. So it's been in the family for a long time. Tommy's the father, Austin's the son, and we're given shots of their where they work, the halls, the rooms. It eases us into them basically performing an autopsy. They're playing music. It establishes that they're good at what they do. It's father and son. It's a family thing. They're good at what they do. It shows us the surroundings we're going to be in for the duration of the film. Great setup, in my
Well, I
opinion.
think they did a good job too establishing from the jump that Austin was learning. He was
Yes,
very good at it, but it was, how much better Tommy,
his
the dad,
father was.
was
Yeah.
because he picked up stuff. In that first autopsy they were doing, they were just like, well, what was the cause of death? And then, he's looking through everything, pops the skull open and finds this like a hemorrhage in the, you know, occipital part of the body. And you could tell that, he said he fell. So that's what caused the death, not, all these other things. And I was like, damn, like, he just noticed this one little thing that was easy to miss, but that plays in later too.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, exactly. The father teaching the son, and clearly he's skilled at this, telling his son, you'll get it eventually. Don't jump to conclusions. Yet again, that sort of plays into later in the film. We're then introduced to Austin's girlfriend, who wants to see a body. She comes in, and we basically learn that she's never been there, which I thought was bizarre because it sort of feels like they've been together a while, and he's never wanted her, to see what he does. She knows what he does. She works, I think, at a library. I
Yeah,
think
the
she says.
bookstore.
She's like, "Oh, I want to see a body." She thinks, I guess it's going to be fun. And then we're given a really cool sequence that sets up a lot of things. Sort of. Tommy comes in and is like, "No, show her." And then we establish he puts bells on the toes or the ankles of the deceased, and he gives the history of why they used to do that, but he just does it because it's
He said he
traditionalist.
was a, yeah, that's what I was just
Yeah.
getting ready to say.
And so we get a little about a bit about his philosophy on how he works. We get a little bit about the relationship between Austin and his girlfriend. Even learning that her Austin wants to leave the business and go off with her. So it's a lot of establishing who the characters are, how they think, where they're at in their life, where they want to be in their life. Um,
Well, to me, it also showed the relationship that although he wants out of the business, he is very close to his father because,
yes,
given the opportunity between going out on a date and hanging out with his female companion, he was just like, nah, I got to help my dad. I don't want to leave him with, all this extra work. So he turned down going on a date, when helped his dad.
something I noticed throughout this portion of the film, they sort of get away from it throughout most of the movie, but at least for this portion, was the soundtrack was a very nice, subtle piano driven pieces of music that were playing, which I like because it was sort of reminds me of a good Stephen King movie where it's sort of calm in the beginning, maybe, or a portion where they're trying to get you not lull you into a sense of safety when
I think
It's
the
not.
first half bored me less than the first half of a Stephen King movie, but
Yeah, true.
ugh,
That was something I was gonna
talk about
when I
slow
was
burns. Jesus.
this was not a slow burn, and it took about halfway before the story kicked in, but the imagery was so shocking throughout that it kept your attention. It didn't feel like what I would consider a slow burn film.
No, the payoff, you didn't have to wait till 3/4 of the way through the
No.
movie to get the payoff. It kept, like you said, it kept you entertained and engaged throughout the whole thing. So this one, I mean, the acting chops of the people who were in it, they all did a great job, but the the way it was written and kind of paced, they did a great job of keeping you entertained throughout, you know, the time, as opposed to, and this isn't a slight on Stephen King. I've read a bunch of his books. I like his movies. I enjoy them, but I have to, be fully rested with a cup of coffee to make it through the first half of some of them.
His books as well as the films based off them, they he needs more editing.
Yes.
That's the best way to describe him. I enjoy his stuff too, but a lot of times I'm like, man, you could have cut this shit down by like 20, 30, 40% in some cases. But yeah. Um, and I love that this film was an hour and 26 minutes. Perfect time. Perfect. Um, so now, I need to establish this. So they have their house, they have a large home, and then the business is underground. And there's two ways to access it. There's an elevator, and then there's a little stairway that leads to sort of what do you
Almost
like?
like a bomb shelter type,
Almost like, yeah,
the old barn
those
door type things.
exactly. So as you stated earlier, Austin's going to leave with his girlfriend, but he ends up not because the sheriff brings in a Jane Doe, and he decides, oh, I'm gonna help work on this with the dad, and then I'll go out with the girlfriend later. And that's when this is when the things start to get interesting. And I love the fact that the movie takes its time for about 10 minutes, maybe, just giving us an autopsy. And then that's when shit gets crazy. But I'm going to go through what they discover in the autopsy. But yeah, what did you think about this process of how they did it?
Well, it, the only thing that I felt was a little different that I hadn't seen in previous, TV shows or movies or whatever, was the basically using wire cutters to pop the rib cage.
Yeah.
Like I have seen, the head part, like when they, saw the head and, they do the big Y incision, they go through the liver and they pull it up and look at it. Like I've seen all that, but I've never seen in a movie that they basically pop the rib cage and then pull it out. Like they pop the sternum and parts of the ribs out, and I had never seen that before. So I was like, "Ooh, that's new."
Yeah.
So I
Oh,
thought,
it's very graphic.
and I thought it was kind of cool how they kept track of everything, which you'll go through in a second. But the chalkboard,
Yes.
to me, that was a very interesting kind of old school way to keep track of everything, and they videotaped everything too, which I don't know because I'm not a coroner. I don't work in a morgue, so I don't know if that's for legal reasons, like they have to like track what it is they're doing to the body, or if it's just to help him, or if that was like his process to where it helped him keep track of everything. I don't know, but I thought that was interesting too.
The As they begin the examination, so it's sort of broken up. Initially you have the outside of the body portion of the autopsy, in which they're just examining the body, and they start to notice something very interesting. The body looks flawless. There's no damage to the body physically on the outside, and yet there are horrible things they notice that are beneath. So you have the wrists and the ankles are broken, shattered. In fact, the tongue
Yeah,
is cut. Tongue is cut out. A fly exits through the nose, leaving a trail of blood. The eyes are gray, which is puzzling to them because it shouldn't be. The corpse looks so fresh. The eyes should not have done that yet. Um, and then they even point out that there's vaginal trauma. Now this all is important to the story because it gives them their first initial theory on what happened to the body, and that is they think she was involved in some kind of horrible sex trade situation, and because he's trying to piece together the cases he'd seen in the past, and that this is the only thing he could come to a conclusion on is she meets that criteria, but it still doesn't make sense to him that the outside of the body, how can you shatter the wrists and the ankles and have no bruising? And so things are starting to get interesting at this point.
Well, and I thought that was, and the blood when they first made the incision, the
Yeah,
Y
yeah, I was going
incision,
to
they
get
were
to the
like,
inside. Yeah,
they
yeah.
said that they don't ever bleed that much, but sometimes there's enough pressure behind it, you know. But normally when they make that incision, unless it's a fresh corpse, they, you know, don't see that kind of bleeding either. But that was the thing, is that when they discovered her, they were just like, well, it's not fresh because there's no lividity. They were, you know, checking the mobility. The bones were,
No
there
rigor
was no rigor
mortis.
mortis at
Mm.
all. So like, how are all these things happen, but she's still basically like she just died?
As you said, when they get into the inside, lots of blood. The lungs are black. There's scar tissue all over the organs. Uh, it's as if he was describing how much she would have to smoke to achieve that level of lung damage,
I
and
think he
all
said
the
what, 10 packs a day
yeah,
for 30 years or something.
exactly. And so they're looking at her and they're like, she has all of these horrible, horrible things that clearly have happened to her, and yet the body still looks fine. And so
I thought it
at
was
this,
kind of cool too. I didn't mean to cut you off.
no, you're
There's
good.
the organs, they had like stab wounds in them.
Yes.
They had like lacerations. So that to me was odd too, because we didn't know what was happening just yet. But for her to have her outside not be scarred or anything, I'm like, how the hell did she have stab wounds on her organs? Like, you know, how was she getting stabbed to where it would cut her internal organs and not have any stab wounds on the outside? I was like, oh shit.
The Yeah, exactly. What did you think at this point as far as where the story might be going?
I didn't know um, until a little bit later when they gave her something saying that she was paralyzed or whatever. Then I thought she was still alive. Like, that the reason there was no bruising and stuff was because all these things had happened to her, but she was basically paralyzed. And during all of this, she was alive. Like, she was still alive at the point where they cracked her chest open. That's where my thought was going when she was bleeding. And they were talking about she's a fresh corpse. There's no rigor mortis. I thought that she was, I've seen, I want to say it was called Coma or something. I'm trying to remember the name of the movie, where they were basically, the person was paralyzing them and doing all these things to them. So they were alive, they could feel it and everything, but they couldn't move. And that's what I thought was going on at first, like something like that.
I thought that too until they cut her heart out. That was the point where,
Yeah,
well,
that I was like, well, she can't still
because
be alive.
you're right. I was thinking, okay, she's still alive. Something's going on here. And then when the heart got cut out, that's when my mind said, okay, we're going in a supernatural direction. That was the moment where I was like, all right, what are we doing? Um, and then, of course, then the film treats us to some. A storm starts. The radio starts doing bizarre things. Austin goes out, starts seeing things, and then now this scene was weird. Tell me, I couldn't figure it out. So they establish earlier in the film they have a cat, and he ends up finding it in a ventilation shaft, and we know the cat goes around killing rats and stuff. But what the hell happened to that? Like, the cat's all jacked up, and they don't really seem to question it. They just like, oh, the cat's dead, and the father snaps its neck to put it out of its misery, and then he goes and burns it. What the fuck happened to the cat? Like, did were you clear on that, or because I wasn't?
Not particularly. However,
Because it was so much blood. I was like, oh, what the hell?
but when he was looking in the vent, it was a little bit of a bigger vent.
Yeah.
Um, they showed that it looked like it had a big bite mark out of the side of it.
That's what it looked like. Yeah.
So,
What kind
well,
of
my
shit would
thinking
do
was
that?
is the Well, we hadn't gone into all the people inside
Well, yeah, but
bodies yet.
I was thinking, what were they thinking? You know, they never really
I don't.
questioned it.
Well, yeah. Well, if
It
he's
was weird.
getting mice, maybe a rat or a raccoon or some
Jesus.
kind of rabid animal, because the bite mark didn't look huge,
Mm,
but so I don't think that they thought it was, a zombie human spirit lady,
no.
but I think that they assumed it was probably just another animal, or because he said something about raccoons earlier, you
Yeah, they had
know,
established, so that's
so
probably what it was. But it
they
was
probably
just
just
like,
assumed it was another animal. But
I was like, Jesus, I'd already be a little like, okay, what the hell? Um, so then we get to, they continue the autopsy. And this is, I checked the time. We're like 30 something minutes into the film, approaching 40 minutes. And they find a flower inside the body. And then they find a cloth with symbols on it and a tooth wrapped in it. So at this point, I was pretty sure I knew what was going on. Um, but only because I'd seen other horror things and I'd seen similar things done. So my mind immediately went to witch, witchcraft. This is a witch, and they were trying to get rid of her, and like that was exactly where my mind went. Witchcraft. Um, what did you think of with that particular portion? The flower, the cloth, the tooth, the symbols.
well, to me, I hadn't seen as many witch type movies, although I've watched the witch, the VVITCH or whatever. Like I've watched movies with witches in them, but I was thinking biblical, like it was a demon or something
Hmm.
housed inside this person's body and they were trying to keep it there. That's what I was thinking because I also read a lot of the Dresden File books and like
Two
they've
more coming out
I know I'm so fucking excited. But
this year, correct?
yeah, like
Both of them. Yeah.
I think one comes out the end of either June or July. I don't remember, but it's coming up, and now I got to go back to work. It could have came out like a month ago, and I would have been able to read both of them.
Yeah.
But now, I can't. Anyway, I thought it was something like that because in those books, there's these Roman coins that they said, were used to pay for the people who killed Jesus or whatever, but they house, demons. So the demons embody different people's basically they're they're meat puppets, and I was
Mhm.
thinking that that's what it was prior
Yeah,
to what we got filled in on later. But
I would
that
have
was my
probably.
initial thought.
Yeah, had I not seen some stuff before I put, that's probably exactly the conclusion I would have came to. Um, so they start to think human sacrifice, torture, like that's where their minds are based on what they're seeing, and then we hit. I think it was about 46 minutes into the film, which is about literally the halfway mark, just past the halfway mark. They find as he's carving into her flesh, sort of peeling the flesh off, symbols tattooed on the inside of her skin, and the scene is really building. Austin's getting scared. The storm's in. The radio, the lights are getting crazy. This whole scene is building and building and building, and then finally, as the Tommy sees what's going on, he sort of freaks out. We get the He's like, we got to get the fuck out of here. He literally says that, and because oh no, I'm wrong. The power goes out,
Yes,
and
and
when
then he yells.
yeah, then he sees all the bodies are missing out of the storage lockers, and that's when he says, "Yeah, we gotta get the fuck out of here." And so, great scene, very tense. You go from being this interesting film, the father and son, the autopsy, the mystery, what's going to now, okay, there's some evil shit happening. Both these characters clearly are aware something is going on, and they're trying to get the hell out.
Yeah, I thought it was. But even prior to the dad being on board, uh, Austin kept saying it. Austin kept being like, "Dad." As they kept finding more stuff, he started to get really uncomfortable. He started to feel like something was amiss even prior to that. But then his dad, like you said, the power goes out and everything. And he's like, "Nah, I believe you now. Let's get the fuck out of here."
Yeah. The So they determine there's no way out. You know, the elevator, the power is not working with the elevator. There's the door, the shutter doors are blocked by a tree. It's storming, which we learned later it wasn't. But um, they're trapped. So they basically go into a particular room and it's like, okay, we'll sort of bunker down in here. And then some weird shit happens. And then the father gets his ass whooped in this bathroom. and, and I mean, it's yeah, that happens. And I guess his ribs or whatever are all broken because he has all this like trauma appearing on his side.
Well, a lot of it throughout this, I think that she was doing to
Yes,
him what was being done to her.
exactly.
So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You can go ahead and talk about that.
well, it's just a lot of the injuries, um, the stab wounds and all the internal bleeding that he started to suffer from, I think was what she suffered from. Uh, Also, shortly after that scene, when they get back in there and they're trying to figure out what's going on, uh, his like wrists get snapped, his feet get snapped, and then he starts breathing out smoke, simulating, I guess, the singeing of her lungs because not only was she tortured, they burned a lot of the witches at the stake back then, so I assume that that's what the lung damage was from, like
Yeah,
actually being singed. So all these things started happening to the dad.
and that's what we basically learn. Yeah, that everything happening to him is sort of what happened to her, and that she's almost lashing out because of the things that had been done to her. And we they get back to the room and come to the conclusion we're going to burn her. And then the door gets attacked, and this is when we see the woman whose eyes and mouth were sewn shut. She's sort of attacking the door. They freak out and they're just like, "Screw it, we're burning. We're gonna burn her right here." Doesn't work. The only thing that happens is they destroy their camera, and they finally do get out. And then this was interesting. The girlfriend comes in, and the Tommy kills her with an axe, but he doesn't know it's her. He thinks it's one of the dead bodies.
Well, because while they were in the autopsy room, they were, if I remember the order correctly, they like set her on fire. They're like trying to get,
Mm-hmm.
Kill her because the crematorium, they couldn't, get her to the
Get her to it.
crematorium. So they were like, fuck it, let's set her on fire. So they get her lit, they put her out, and then he uses that axe to try and basically vacate. So they make it out, and then they're trying to get on the elevator. The elevator works for like a half a second, and they kept seeing one of the people that were inside following them, and it looked like the one that got shot in the head.
And even had the bell ringing.
Yeah, which was great. So he hears the bell. He sees, somebody walking down the hallway. So Tommy, without even giving it a second thought, as soon as someone walks around that corner, he hit him with the axe. And like you said, it ended up being the girlfriend and not one of the spirit zombie people.
So she dies in Austin's arms, and we basically, at that point, I'm like, how the hell did she get down there? All the access points were blocked, but we learn later that all that's basically not true. I guess it's an illusion to some degree because there was no storm, there was no tree blocking that door.
Well, it wasn't a storm. It wasn't even raining because
Yeah,
they mentioned
nothing. 4 days of clear skies.
This is the fourth straight day of sun.
So she probably just came on down normal, and that's led to her death. She dies in Austin's arms, and then we're given a scene which was interesting because been given hints, and they still don't outright say it. But Austin and Tommy are sitting there, and we know that he was upset with the cat died because it belonged to his wife. She's been gone for 2 years. I get it alludes to maybe a suicide or an OD. It doesn't outright say. I don't believe. It just felt like she died. But it sounds like it was, she was depressed. And so that gives us a little insight into their relationship.
Yeah, I'm not sure. My guess would be just suicide based off of
That was
the kind of context clues. However, cancer a lot of times not only is the person depressed, the people around that person's depressed, because it's not normally a quick thing. So if I got diagnosed with like stage 4 cancer,
Hmm.
like you guys all know I'm going to die. So it normally that makes it easier to cope with, but not always. Sometimes it's you basically living in that day, waiting day to day, and that to me would be depressing as shit. Like, you know, basically just counting days on a calendar. So for the person who's living with it and the people living with them, I'd imagine that'd be hard as shit. I haven't had
Yeah,
to personally deal with that, but like I can't
yeah,
imagine.
yeah. The movie never directly tells us, so we just know that she's been gone 2 years, and we know she was dealing with something, and it just sort of leaves it to you to, you know, figure it out, or come to your own conclusions.
I don't think it's super important to the plot.
It's not. It was more so an explanation for the relationship between the father and son, and Austin not not really wanting to stay, but at the same time wanting to be there for his dad. So it just sort of ties back into that. Um, let's see here. Killed girlfriend. Blah blah blah. So after all this, they basically like, you know what, we're screwed if we just stay here. So let's get in there and finish this autopsy and figure out what the hell's going on. And so they get in there and they continue the autopsy, and they take a sample of the brain, and they just, it's clear as day under the microscope, she's alive. There's brain function. That brain is not a dead brain. So of course, how the hell is she alive when her organs are all cut out and she's bled out, etc. So then they do some investigating with the cloth with all the symbols, and they come to the conclusion that, and we discussed this before we started recording, their conclusion isn't necessarily right, because how, you know what I mean? So the conclusion is she was one of the girls during the Salem witch trials, and they thought she was a witch. Now their conclusion is she wasn't a witch, but they tortured her and did all these ritualistic things to her, which turned her into a witch slash vengeful, spirit, if you will. Um, it's a hell of a conclusion to come to. not not saying that. In other words, if they made a sequel to this, they could twist that around a little bit and go in a different direction. Clearly, she's from the Salem witch trial era because of the information on the thing. But to jump to the conclusion she was never a witch, and that, I don't know, we're in their world is a world where there's dark magic and witches and all that. So who knows?
Yeah, it's very hard to figure out what the conclusion is in a world that isn't a real world. So
Yeah.
it's very hard.
So the father basically, she's going crazy at this point. Things are getting crazy in the room, and the father basically tells her, "Look, take me and spare my son." So, as you said earlier, all the horrible things that happened to her happened to him, and we see her body restore itself. So pre-autopsy, the son, then everything calms down, and he hears the sheriff banging on the door. He runs out there. He goes up there, and it's the sheriff starts singing that creepy song from the radio, and this leads to Tommy's corpse sort of appearing there, scaring Austin. He falls to his death. And now we have the end of the movie where the cops are now, it's similar to the scene from the beginning of the movie where the cops are all laid out in there investigating this horrific murder scene, and they can't figure out what the hell happened.
Well, I think going back to the vengeful spirit slash witch, um, I think that plays into the end because a witch, just from my horror movie knowledge, um, you look at she's dead or she's not operable. So at what point is she, writing spells or cursing people or doing whatever? But to me, it seemed more like a poltergeist or like a spirit that was doing all these things, because to make it to where it was like storming, to make it to where it was, the music was playing, those kind of things. it just to me felt more like a spirit as opposed to that. But towards the end, it's, you find out all these things, and it's really, I don't know, well done. Like, everybody dies. You find out it really wasn't raining. And now, like you said, they have to figure out how these three people died. Clearly, Tommy was stabbed. The sun fell, and there's this person axe murdered, and there's nobody else there. So
Yeah.
they're like, how the hell did this happen?
The one of the cops asks the sheriff. She's like, "Well, there's another morgue and somewhere," and he's just like, "No, I want this Jane Doe out of my county. Ship her off." Even he is just freaked out by these events, and they all seem to revolve around this Jane Doe. So he's just like, "No, I want it out of my county." The final shot is her being transported in a ambulance, and that music, that creepy song, starts playing on the radio. Camera pans down, and she wiggles her toe, and cut to credits. My question was, are we establishing that she's now regained her ability to function as a being, or is that just a nod to the audience that this cycle is going to just keep going? What is her end game and her revenge?
Well, that I don't know. I have no idea what her end game was, but that's why it strengthens my spirit, or I don't know, demon, or I'm not a demonologist or whatever. I don't know. Like, I don't know what they're called, but
That is what they're called.
oh well, there you go. See, I didn't know what they were called. But thinking of that, for her to basically have her body back, it goes back to like what I said about the Dresden File books. These demons are possessing the body, but they're basically just like giant meat puppets. But they basically sucked Tommy's soul out and Tommy's, well-being, and put it back into this other meat puppet, this other soul, or this other person. So is that meaning that they're fully reformed, or they're, basically coming out of their paralysis state? Or did these people free something? Because throughout the movie, they're showing that they did all these rituals and stuff, but why would they do all these rituals when, knowing what little I know about the Salem witch trials, that they weren't performing rituals on these people. They were just torturing them and trying to get them to basically admit that they're witches. And when they didn't, they're like, well, if you live, then you're a witch. If you die, then you're dead.
Yeah. Why specifically on her?
Yeah. So I'm thinking that it's more, and that's why I was thinking more biblical, and it was more of a demon type thing. But I think by doing everything that they did, the autopsy, they released what was binding that demon, kind of like, a genie in a bottle type thing. They let it out, and now it's free to walk the earth.
Yeah, there was a portion when he went to the doors and he was hearing like the sheriff. There was a moment where I thought, what if the world outside those doors, what if like the apocalypse has started? Like she's sort of a harbinger of the end times, and they've unleashed it on the world. And that was for a second, that was one of my theories. Of course, that's not what happened, really. But if they wanted to make a sequel or even a prequel to this, they could. I don't know that they ever will. They don't need to. It's fine as is. But you could do a backstory of who she is. Is she really a witch? Is she not? How that all played out, or a sequel, or a combination of the two, a sequel with. I don't know that there's any plans to do anything like that, but it's a movie that
Godfather Part 2.
It could be like actually exactly like The Godfather 2.
Yeah,
that's true.
A sequel prequel.
But it's one of those movies where if they never make a sequel, if they never make another one, I'm cool with it. Or if they're like, hey, we're going to try something new, I'd be like, okay, I'm sort of interested to see what they're going to do with it.
I'd be
Yeah.
very, I'd be very intrigued to see what they did with the second one, but I hope they don't. Like I enjoyed it enough because, like we talked about, iconic type of horror movies. You know, you look at Halloween, Freddy, Jason, like all these, Friday the 13th movies that were good, but the more they came out with, or even Saw, like I loved the first Saw. I did not much care for anyone after the first one. I thought it was very innovative the way they did it, the way it ended. Like I was like, holy shit, this is awesome. And then, come Saw 7. Like I stopped giving a shit. I was just like, oh, this is dumb.
Yeah, the
But
problem. Yeah, go ahead.
no, I was just saying because leaving it like they did to me is a perfect way to end it. Like leave
Mhm.
you thinking, leave you wanting more without necessarily giving it to you.
Yeah, because the problem with a sequel, even to something like this, is chances are they never thought of where the story would go or even all the details of the past. You know what I mean? So to tell that story, you'd literally just be pulling it out of your ass. There's no, there's no plan. There's no vision for where the story is supposed to go. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. I think one of my favorite
Yeah, it wasn't.
sequel.
I was just saying it wasn't written like a trilogy where they were giving
No,
you a tidbit and then they mapped out the rest of it. Like you said, they're just making shit up.
you take Child's Play 2. I love Child's Play 2 more than one. One's great, and they're very different films. But to me, I'm using that as an example because I hated 3. So you had Child's Play 1, and then Child's Play 2, there's so many logic holes in it as far as going from 1 to 2, and yet it still enjoyed the film. But then you get a Child's Play 3, and it was horrible. I never liked that movie. So,
Or Home Alone. Home Alone 1 and
yeah.
2 were great. And then anything after that was dog shit.
But when movies like that, when a movie costs $1 or $2 million to make, and it's successful, well, if this, I'll say this, if this movie had a theatrical release and it had an opening weekend of 15-20 million dollars, and went on to generate 80 million dollars, even less than 100, but 80 million or something, there would be a sequel already.
Oh, yeah, it would have been a paranormal activity or
Yes.
whatever.
Yes. Um, but no, yeah, I loved it. I very much enjoyed it. Um, so yeah, that's about it. I'm trying to think if there's any other thing I wanted to dig into. Mm, anything else you want to say?
No, there's a couple parts that led up to other parts that I really enjoyed, but there wasn't a lot of foreshadowing. So I felt like at every turn, it wasn't necessarily a surprise, but it was like, oh, that's cool. Like it did a very good job of answering questions without leaving you, I don't know, to figure out what it was that they were trying to achieve. Like we talked about some things that we thought maybe they got wrong, but they weren't necessarily arguing with us. They weren't trying to justify, well, she wasn't a witch. I mean, they just stated what they thought.
Yeah.
So for me to have a differing opinion isn't necessarily a bad thing. It just
Well, even
it would be
yeah,
like if
yeah,
we were in that movie and we were all sitting there. If there was more characters, they may not have agreed with each other. They may have been like, "That's bullshit." But it's a father and a son group that are working closely together, trying to figure out why this is happening, and that's the conclusion they came to.
yeah. They're because when they do jump to that conclusion, you're right in that it's like, well, how the hell do you know she wasn't really a witch? This is a world where witches clearly are a thing. Why is she the only one that's like this? How did it work? Who did this to her? Were they evil? Maybe she was innocent and some evil people did something. You know what I mean? There's so many possibilities. And then even up to the point where it's like, well, what does she want? And then, the father makes that deal with her, but she sort of screws him over because she kills the son anyways. So she is evil. Um, but I like all that. I like this is a movie I would love to sit down and watch with someone who hasn't seen it and just see how they feel about it. And
Oh, me too, because it's, they talk about even people, non theatrical people, like it's, evil can produce evil. Like if you come from if you're a product of, severe abuse and this kind of stuff, normally those are the people who abuse others. So it's not, even if she was innocent and all these bad things happened to her and then she became a vengeful spirit, that wouldn't be that hard to believe because a bunch of awful shit happened to her. So
yeah,
now she's basically an awful person now too. And that's not far fetched. It's just not what I interpreted by the clues that they gave.
yeah. Um, so yeah, loved it. Check it out. Well, if you're listening to this point, I hope you already have. Comment what you think about the film or what you like or dislike about our conversation. And as I said, the next film review won't be until not next, not the coming Friday, but the one after. Next Sunday, you'll be getting a Perry Mason sort of preview. I guess the best way to describe it. And
It
yeah,
comes
we'll
out on
be
Father's Day.
yes.
Starts on Father's Day.
So yeah, you'll be getting 2 videos a week starting then. And yeah, thanks for subbing if you've subbed, and if you haven't, please do so. The channel will be expanding, more content, and all right, thanks. Anything else?
I just the next movie will probably be something off of HBO Max because that's what I've been looking at, but I haven't decided what yet.
All righty, bye.
Toodles.